Good morning all, and welcome to today's webinar about compliance and how the sector should best prepare today's stock for the future. Today's event, sponsored by Pennington Choices, is obviously about an issue of critical importance to housing providers and their tenants and residents. Just this week we had another reminder of why. With Green Square Accord found to be in breach of the English Regulator of Social Housing's home standard. In that case, it emerged that hundreds of its homes do not have current fire risk assessments, and more than 10,000 had never had an electrical inspection. So I don't think you need me to join the dots really on why that's important. And of course, the proposed fire and building safety regulatory changes following consultation on changes to the fire safety order and the upcoming building safety bill mean there are a number of changes ahead for social landlords in relation to compliance and resident safety. The government described the bill as a framework to improve compliance with tougher penalties for those who break the rules. And we'll be coming and discussing more about those changes moving forward. So I won't go into too much more detail about them here. But yeah, absolutely, it's a critical importance for every housing provider, really. Earlier this year, a survey we carried out in association with Pennington Choices suggested a number of areas organisations are finding challenging. And again, there'll be more about that later. But today's webinar will be looking at what needs to change and how processes, data analysis and resource need improving in the next 12 to 18 months. So what are we going to need to do in the immediate future to get where we need to be? To talk us through things, we've got an absolutely fantastic panel of speakers lined up today. We'll be hearing from Angela Holden, Assistant Director at Investigation and Enforcement with the Regulator of Social Housing, Lee Woods, Operations Director, Pennington Choices, Liz Oliver, Safer Homes Director with Hyde Housing, and Kelly Privatera, Asset and Building Safety Manager, that new role with Watford Community Housing Trust. So welcome all, and we'll be hearing from them very shortly. But before we do that, and before we kick things off, just a quick poll to get a bit of a feel for the areas that are uppermost in your minds today, and really where your thoughts are. So yeah, poll should be up on your screen now. So I'll give you a few seconds to enter. Which one of the following compliance areas does your organisation find the most challenging? And a range of options from gas servicing, electrical inspection, fire risk assessment, asbestos management, lift maintenance. So a few options there. Nothing usually scientific, but it's just to get us a bit of a feel for what's on your minds at the moment. So I'll just give another couple of seconds for you to click on the option that for you feels the most relevant, and we'll move hopefully to the results now. So let's get a bit of a feel for the room this morning, and I think fairly unsurprisingly, fire risk assessments right up there, with 62.5% of you highlighting that. And interesting, I mean, given what we've just been talking about in terms of electrical inspection, 17.2% of you electrical inspections. That's the next on the list of people in the room today. So yeah, interesting insight to get things moving with. Thank you very much for that, and hopefully that can inform our discussions a little bit as we move forwards. And I should say, before we kick things off, a reminder that there is the question and answer box. Please do use that to ask any questions that you've got. This is absolutely about takeaways for you, things that are going to be useful to you in your jobs and will inform your thinking moving forward. So you make use of that Q&A box, and we'll get through, following the presentations, as many questions as we possibly can. So yeah, just to tee that up, and yeah, get them coming in throughout the presentations, and we'll get moving as soon as those are finished. Right, that is more than enough from me. So I will now introduce Angela. The floor is yours, so please take it away. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you all today. With the changes to fire and building safety requirements and the implementation of the Social Housing White Paper, this is a really pivotal moment for the sector. The sector is under greater scrutiny than ever. There's never been a better time for providers to make sure that they're doing the important things really well. The regulator's been carrying out our reactive role on consumer regulation for a number of years, And while that hasn't allowed us to go out and carry out planned inspections of social housing providers in terms of their compliance with the consumer standards, it has given us a broad and detailed insight into the sector and where things can go right and where things can go wrong. The regulator handles around 600 referrals every year, and they come from a wide variety of stakeholders. Most commonly, they come from tenants and directly from registered providers in line with their duties to be transparent with the regulator. We also, in recent years, have seen an increase in referrals from local authorities as well. The referrals cover a full spectrum of providers, some very large, some very small, and everything in between. And I don't think we can draw anything in terms of where it's likely to go wrong. I think we've seen that in the full cross-section of providers that we engage with. Almost 50% of our casework each year relates to the home standard. So that's concerns about the quality of accommodation or a provider's compliance with statutory health and safety requirements. Essentially, 50% of our casework is looking at whether tenants are safe in their homes. And it's our view that this is the most fundamental responsibility of all landlords. From what we see in our engagement with providers, there are a lot of things that the sector does really well. By and large, it's a compliant sector with committed teams who want to do the right things and who want tenants to be safe and to feel safe in their homes. But there are occasions when things go wrong. We've seen cases where providers haven't carried out basic statutory health and safety checks, or where providers have carried out those checks but then haven't followed up on the required actions to address any risk to tenants. And Martin alluded to one of those cases in his introduction. There's always a variety of reasons why such failures occur, and for well-run organisations, it's really tempting to think that those failures couldn't happen here. But they can, and they do, happen to lots of organisations. And so it's really important that all organisations continue to look to themselves and look at their systems and their processes to make sure that they're as strong as they need to be, and that they continue to evolve to reflect the dynamic environment that the sector operates in. I'd suggest there are 3 key areas for providers to have a think about in terms of delivering a compliant outcome and safe homes for tenants. Firstly, the information that you hold. This is a really broad category, but it relates to the information about your stock and what that stock needs, but also the information you hold about your tenants and what they need. It also relates to the quality of information you hold, how accurate it is, how that's tested. We often see providers to struggle because of gaps or inaccuracies in their data, because they've not got a good record of how many properties they own, how many gas checks they need to carry out, or how many properties need a fire risk assessment. And understanding this will help you now, even if you're already really good at this, but it will also help you prepare for the implementation of the white paper. The second point that I wanted to talk about today is ensuring that your organisation has robust systems and processes in place to deliver compliance and to assure yourselves that tenants are safe in their homes. Every organisation will have different arrangements for delivering housing services to their tenants, and I'm not here to tell you that one way is better than any other. How a registered provider chooses to deliver their services to tenants are individual decisions, and they're rightly taken by those who are responsible for the organisation. But we've seen things go wrong in processes, for example, where there are really complex systems, where staff have struggled to operationalise those systems, and that leaves them in a difficult position when things don't go to plan. Or we've seen things where systems aren't joined up in such a way as to give a rounded picture of what's happening on the ground. We've also seen significant failures in management and contractual arrangements, so where providers have outsourced delivery to a third party, but then have overlooked that they still are responsible for ensuring that those management arrangements deliver good outcomes for tenants. And I'd encourage all registered providers to look at their systems and processes carefully and to think about whether they're as strong as you need them to be, both now and whether they're fit for the future as well. Investing time and resources to doing this on a regular basis means there's continuous learning for organisations and that your systems can keep pace with what is a rapidly changing operating environment for the sector. Linked to that, I'd also encourage you to think about the leadership that's shown in relation to health and safety compliance in your organisation. This will become more critical with the requirement for registered providers to have a named person responsible for health and safety within your organisations, but it also matters now. We've seen lots of issues in the past with poor oversight by executive members and boards, cultural issues sometimes that mean concerns aren't escalated and aren't addressed as early as they should be, and a lack of board understanding of responsibilities. So it's good to start thinking about the leadership and oversight that you're giving to this really critical area. The third and final point I'd ask you to think about is how you engage with your tenants. We see lots of referrals where tenants report feeling unsafe in their homes, and often when we look into it, we can see that their homes are safe, but this hasn't been properly explained to them. The alternative, of course, we also see is where tenants' concerns about their homes are well-founded, but this critical message hasn't been heard by their landlord, and so they've not been able to respond to it. Tenant engagement really matters, not just for the tenants themselves, although of course that is very important, but also because the tenants know what the services are like on the ground, and they can give organisations detailed and rich information about their experiences. They're also a really great source of information to allow registered providers to identify when things are going wrong at an early stage. And listening to your tenants and having the mechanisms to hear the messages that those tenants are giving is really vital to helping organisations address emerging issues before they become bigger problems. As the regulator, we're preparing to implement the Social Housing White Paper, and with that will be the move to more proactive consumer regulation. Alongside that will be the introduction of tenant satisfaction measures as a way of improving the transparency from registered providers and also tenants' abilities to hold their landlords to account. While implementing some of the white paper will need changes in legislation for the regulator, the most substantive changes are those that will occur in the relationship between landlords and their tenants, and we think that there are steps that landlords can be taking now in order to prepare for implementation of the white paper, so organisations are in the best possible place to respond when that legislation comes. Thanks very much.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Sorry, I was just finding mute there. Thanks, Angela, for an absolutely fantastic opening presentation and overview there, and definitely some kind of questions that kind of spring to my mind about the learning that might be emerging, and plenty of questions already coming in. Just a reminder to you to use that Q&A box and to get your questions in so we can get through as many as possible, and hopefully be as useful as possible to you in your organisations. So yeah, please do use that Q&A box, and it's good to see so many of you already are. So thank you very much for that, and thank you, Angela. Right, Lee, welcome. It is over to you. So yeah, please take it away.
Thanks, Martin, and thanks, Angela. I'm not sure how I'll follow that. Anyway, I'm going to talk about a recent survey, the recent survey that Martin alluded to earlier, where we surveyed 128 social housing landlords. 82 were registered providers and 46 were local authorities stroke ALMOs. And we asked Inside Housing to pose a couple of questions. The first was, is the sector compliant with the legislation of today and therefore keeping tenants safe in their homes? And the second question was, is the sector prepared for the legislation of tomorrow, the Building Safety Bill, the Fire Safety Act, the Social Housing White Paper, etc., so it can continue to keep tenants safe in their homes? In addition to that, Pennington Choices has carried out compliance health checks, compliance reviews, and implemented compliance roadmaps for more than 100 landlords, who represent more than 50% of those landlords regulated by the Regulator of Social Housing with over 1,000 homes. And the results from Inside Housing survey and our own body of work over the last 6 years show that there are still major gaps in resident safety compliance. But I suppose the question is why, and what can we do to address it? Well, the themes from both the Inside Housing survey and our own body of work are fairly similar, but more of that later. Firstly, I just want to give you a snippet of the results. So in terms of, is the sector compliant with the legislation of today, and keeping tenants safe in their homes? We looked at this and the results were quite startling. So in the case of gas, 2 in 10 landlords demonstrated that they were 100% compliant with gas safety, but 8 in 10 were not. When we looked at electrical safety, 1 in 10 landlords were saying that they were 100% compliant on a 5-year programme, whereas 9 in 10 were not 100% compliant, despite 67% of landlords now operating on a 5-year cycle. 4 in 10 landlords had fire risk assessments for all their sites, but 6 in 10 didn't. 6 in 10 delivered their fire risk assessment actions on time, but 4 in 10 didn't. With regards to asbestos, 3 in 10 have an asbestos management survey or re-inspection for 100% of their sites, but 7 in 10 don't. And with water, 4 in 10 have a Legionella risk assessment for 100% of their sites, but 6 in 10 don't. So they're fairly significant numbers. And then we ask the question, is the sector prepared for tomorrow's legislation, i.e. the Building Safety Bill, etc.? And 54% of the sector know which of their buildings are going to be within scope of the new Building Safety Bill, but 46% didn't know. And when we talked about governance and leadership, and Angela alluded to this, 31% of the sector's boards and leaders have a detailed understanding of the duties and implications of the new building safety regime, but 69% don't. And so what was our initial view on the results? Well, whilst we expected there to be some gaps, these were significant gaps at a scale, particularly when you consider the fact that much of the legislation has been in place for almost 20 years in most cases. Effectively, what I'm saying is it's not as if any of this is new. And what our initial view showed was our work with local authorities and ALMOs indicate that they are actually further behind than most of the RPs we have worked with. And we are aware that the regulator has written to the local authorities and ALMOs in recent times, reminding them of their obligations. But we are seeing some significant issues in local authorities and ALMOs particularly. So why are organisations struggling with this? Well, the Inside Housing Survey basically picked out 6 issues. The first was around IT systems and data management. And again, Angela alluded to this in her presentation. Governance and lack of oversight and knowledge. And again, Angela referred to that in her presentation. Competence was an issue that the sector was talking about, recruiting the right people with the right skills to deliver. There was an issue around the COVID-19 lag effect and what that's meant for organisations. And then there were organisations who talked about their failure to carry out fire risk assessments and deliver fireworks. And part of that was due to the demand for competent contractors who can deliver these fire safety works. So those were the themes coming out of the Inside Housing Survey. The Pennington's body of work, we looked at, we've looked at why organisations are struggling, and we bring this down to 6 key factors, some of which overlay the factors that have come out of the Inside Housing Survey. Ultimately, governance and leadership is where this starts and finishes. If there's strong governance, strong leadership and strong oversight of this area of activity, organisations tend to do it better. Where that governance and leadership oversight is not strong and those systems of control are not strong, we tend to find that organisations struggle more. Angela alluded to data management. It's a massive issue for the sector. Data management within organisations is invariably fragmented, and organisations' ability to pull this together and tell a coherent story that is a single source of truth is often very, very difficult for organisations to do. So working on a strategy around data management and how organisations are going to manage that is really important. Policy development is also important, and where are decisions made about how you are going to comply with these obligations? Often it's taken at an operational level. It should be taken at a governance and a strategic level. The fourth thing we find is around reporting and the line of sight that boards have to good quality data and information and reporting on resident safety. And often that's a miss, or it's hit and miss in organisations. And so if you can't see non-compliance, it's very difficult to address it. And then a couple of other things are around competence and that second and third line of defence that organisations need to really triangulate on their approach to property compliance. So what does this really tell us? Well, what it tells us is that these common failings, both the ones from the Inside Housing Survey and from our own body of work and the observations from Angela and the regulator, is unless they're addressed, we believe that they will continue to prevent landlords from both complying today, but just as importantly, from getting prepared and ready to be able to comply tomorrow. And the fact that the majority of landlords are not compliant today is going to prevent them from achieving what they need to do tomorrow. Now, what are the key messages that I would take from that? Well, what I would say is don't wait in getting your compliance sorted today. Make it a strategic priority at board and governance level and leadership level if it's not already. Ensure your boards and leaders have clear line of sight. And if not, particularly if you're operational staff and you're concerned about this, escalate concerns to the leadership team and board, and if necessary, to others, and commission and help and support if needed. Get the building safety bill onto the board and leadership agenda if it's not already there. Start to audit and form a view about your stock and which buildings will fall under the building safety legislation. We know that 46% of landlords don't know the answer to that question yet, and clearly they need to. And also decide if the principles of the building safety bill are going to apply to all of your homes or just those homes which fall under the legislation itself. We talked to a number of landlords who are proposing to adopt the principles of it for all of their stock, whether it's high-rise or not. So think about your approach. And Angela has alluded to the fact that the regulator is currently developing the tenant satisfaction measures, which will effectively require landlords to demonstrate their compliance in these areas of activity, both to the regulator and to their residents. In terms of these issues, how can you go about fixing them? Well, you can fix your compliance with the Big Six through what we call a roadmap to compliance, and that will deal with and address those issues of governance, those issues of policy direction. That will help you organise your data in a way that you do have a cohesive, one single source of truth that will address the competence and that will address the validation and reporting of the Big Six. You can also think about commissioning a building safety gap analysis. It's a good starting point to understand where you are and understand what you need to do to start preparing well for the building safety bill of tomorrow. So some difficult stuff for housing organisations to get to grips with there. I just wanted to finish though on a more positive note, because we have worked with a number of organisations who do fantastic work around compliance and are holding, are ensuring that their tenants are safe and do have really, really strong regimes in place. I'm going to name a few. Weaver Vale Housing Trust, Progress Housing Group, Berners-Lee Homes, Sovereign Housing Association. Clearly there are many more, and I know Liz from Hyde and Kelly from Watford will talk about what their organisations are doing, and I know that they're going to talk about data and building information management systems. So, there is some good stuff out there in the sector, but the gaps at the moment still remain a concern, and we do need to focus our governance and leadership attention on those gaps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. And there's a couple of questions coming in already, and a few people asking, can we see the results of the survey? And just for anybody who is curious about that, there is a write-up in Inside Housing, so I'd point you in that direction if nowhere else. So it's on Inside Housing. I think the headline is "Survey Reveals Gaps in Safety Compliance," but you can find it on our website. So yeah, certainly it is available. Right, thank you very much, Lee. Lots of questions there, and lots to pick up on in the Q&A. And like I say, loads of questions already coming in. A reminder to everybody who's listening in: please do use that Q&A box, and I will get to as many as possible in the Q&A that will follow. Right. Thank you, Lee, and Liz, welcome, and it is over to you.
Thanks, Martin, and again, thank you for inviting me to attend this really kind of important subject. I'm Liz Oliver, the Safer Homes Director at Hyde Housing, and what I thought I would do is kind of chat through some of the work that we have done to kind of get us into a level of really good data quality. So we undertook a data assurance piece of work, and there was 4 key principles that we wanted to look at. So we wanted to ensure that we had one source of the truth. So that would allow us to have confidence in our data with simple reporting. We wanted to provide consistent, accurate and transparent property baseline data for measuring compliance across all work streams. We wanted to deliver definitive assurance to underpin our communal performance indicators. And finally, we wanted to implement a consistent way of working and managing high level of data within compliance, because we know data is such a fundamental part of what we do within compliance. So I'm just going to kind of read out some key facts and figures of what that piece of work undertook. So we looked at over 71,000 individual pieces of data, of component data that was reviewed. This was looking at the UPRNs, looking at ensuring that all the frequencies for our servicing and routine inspections were carried out, And we made updates to 90% of our stock. So again, just some drilling down into that. So for our lift data, we looked and tested 1,543 pieces of data. Electrical, over 32,000. Legionella, just around 1,500. FRAs, 3,000. Fire servicing, just under 4,000. So these are huge numbers of data. Gas, as you can imagine, was really high numbers of data, was over 24,000. So if we just take those little individual components for building safety and is making sure that we're looking at building safety holistically, how that builds up to provide that picture is absolutely fundamental. Just drilling a little bit deeper into the fire aspect, is we had a number of systems that were tracking our fire actions. So we had 5 different systems, and that was going from cloud-based systems to some spreadsheets. We combined that into one cloud-based system, and that allowed us to have live, transparent data from our actions, and that can be managed and assessed at any point in time. So now what are we going to do with that data, and how are we structuring Hyde? So as we were looking at that data, we wanted to ensure that we had the right team in place to undertake the work. And I split this up into 3 different distinct areas. I had the operational compliance, so gas, electric, Legionella, asbestos, and that function. I've then got a head of fire safety and delivery, so that's everything to do with the fire actions, the risk assessment programme, our major remediation works that we're working on, and then an assurance function. And that assurance function is the critical friend. It's that additional line of assurance just to make sure what we're reporting on, what our data is saying, where it's coming from, is assessed, and we've got that clear visibility. As we progress, we have looked at undertaking a building safety pilot programme. And this is starting to really look at our readiness for the Fire Safety Act and the Building Safety Bill. We were audited recently by our internal auditors, and we got positive assurance for that audit. So what did that look at? That looked at the fire safety strategy that we've got for going forward. We are looking at 2 large schemes, one in Gosport, one in Bermondsey, to see how we can look at the building safety manager function and ensure that that is spread out, and it's ensuring that we're keeping up to date with the data. The resident engagement is really important in ensuring that we've got that 2-way communication path. We want to ensure that we've got the right analytics to assist producing the building safety case. So how are we building all that up? So again, we're looking at the competency in staff, that looking at training. So we're developing a training passport. We are working throughout the whole of our business to ensure that we've got the right engagement strategy, but we've also set up a Safer Homes panel, which includes our customers. So we've got a number of customers from throughout our blocks and our properties to provide us with that support to really ensure that we are maintaining that open dialogue. We're starting work on the gateway process, and this is to all ensure that we have got a really great building safety service, one that's fully auditable, one that is completely transparent, and at any point in time that we can look and see where our compliance levels are throughout this fundamental stream. Thank you very much for your time.
Fabulous. Thank you, Liz. There's a lot of questions coming in, and some quite specific ones for you, so we'll pick up on them very, very shortly. Lots of you using that Q&A box, which is great to see. And just a final reminder that is there, and please do use that, throughout the final presentation, and I'll pick up on as many as possible very, very shortly. Thank you, Liz. We are now going to hand over to Kelly. I think there's been some sound problems in advance of this, so it's a kind of drum roll moment, really. So, Kelly, welcome, and it is over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to see whether you can hear me or not, Martin. If you can give me a thumbs up or not, that would be great.
I can hear you absolutely fine,
Fantastic.
Kelly. Yeah, that's great.
Fantastic. We have had a bit of a morning, so apologies. My name's Kelly. I work for Watford Community Housing as the named Building Safety Manager. I'm just going to talk to you a few minutes about our journey as a smaller housing association, navigating through the changing world of building safety, and hopefully giving you some reassurance, especially to some of the smaller organisations. Back in 2018, when the Hackett Review was published, I started to attend as many seminars and webinars as possible, gleaning as much information as I could. I would listen to some of the really large organisations that spoke about having departments that looked after all the different areas of compliance. And after listening to Liz as well, I quickly realised that the 30 or 40 roles that they had were covered by just me and my team of 4. Luckily, currently, we just have 2 buildings that fall within the current 18-metre scope of the Building Safety Bill. So what have we done to start applying the Building Safety Bill principles? What does my work entail, and what are we doing to future-proof ourselves? Initially, we probably followed a similar vein to most of you. We carried out a full Type 4 FRA on our high-rise and started to remedy all compartmentation issues. We improved our domestic alarm coverage, increasing our specification to an LD1 system with interlinked alarms, and installed sprinklers in all of our domestic areas of the buildings. All in all, we spent over £1.5 million to ensure that both our high-rises are where they need to be. Then, like most, we embarked on a large-scale data integrity programme. We looked at all of our information, not just on the 2 high-rise buildings, but across all of our stock, and really went back to basics, ensuring that we had no gaps in any servicing and inspection, and ensuring that each building had all of the relevant digital documents, highlighting any gaps as we went. We then looked at how we could use the golden thread approach to maintain our records. Then for me came the hardest part, engaging our customers. We have digital boards in many of our blocks that we can update at the touch of a button. We use text and email to update our wider customer base. But as we know from the draft Building Safety Bill, paying lip service to resident engagement isn't going to cut it. So we enlisted a group of customers from across all sectors to form a resident safety group. They quickly told us that they wanted to have a named person they could go to. They wanted more face-to-face interactions and a more physical presence from our staff. They wanted to know that their housing officer knew of them, and they wanted to be able to build trust with people, not organisations. So I immediately set out to ensure that I attended as many of our resident associations as possible, albeit virtually. We no longer send updates via email to be read out. We make sure we are visible and that the members know who to approach with building safety issues. And building safety is always an agenda item. On the back of the feedback from our residents, we also restructured our housing team. They now look after much smaller areas. This is a recent change, but we're hoping that our customers see the benefit of knowing their neighbourhood officer. In turn, all the officers have had up-to-date training for them to feel more comfortable spotting and reporting issues regarding building and fire safety. Finally, we undertook a huge resident engagement task. We called it the Big Door Knock. We partly closed the office for a full day, and every single office-based member of staff, including our exec team, went out into our communities, and we knocked on every one of our residents' doors, engaging with over 3,000 customers in just one day. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't something we could do every year, and it won't form part of our resident engagement strategy moving forward. but it was a great opportunity for us to reconnect with our customers and hopefully build some trust. We spoke to them about building safety, we gave fire tips, and then we also listened to their niggles and their gripes. So that's got us where we are today, but for us, what is next? We are currently starting our building safety case. We have employed the services of Varensoni and Calford Seedon to help us in our journey. We are working on a full BIM model with COBE data, which will form part of our live building safety document. This is no easy feat on a 60-year-old building, but the addition of BIM will mean that we have a really good basis to work upon. We were lucky enough as an organisation to be part of the early stages of BIM for HA's group. For those of you that may not have heard of it, the group have worked with the support of the National Housing Federation to develop a toolkit to help the sector digitally manage vital building information. I've provided a link, so please sign up if you'd like to know more. The toolkit is free to download and explains how BIM can assist with developing the golden thread of building information. At Watford, we're currently looking at all of our internal systems to see how we ensure that we capture all of that information that relates to the building safety case in one place, remembering that the safety case is and always will be a live document. Following on from this, I've been extremely lucky that our board and the partnerships team are taking building safety so seriously and future-proofing our business. They see BIM as the way forward to ensure that all of our new build properties, whether in scope or not, are ready for any changes within the bill. Working with Varen, they have ensured that all of our contractors provide BIM and COBE data on all newly built properties in order for us to easily begin the golden thread approach from the moment of handover. Before I finish, if I could get you to take a few things away from my presentation, it would be to download the BIM for HA toolkit. Use it to convince your boards and exec teams that this is the best way forward for you to be able to keep your data current. I think the links can be found in the related content. And connect with your customers. Ask them how they want to be engaged and don't presume that you always know. And lastly, remember that you're not alone. Whether you work for a large or a small company, whether it's a housing association or you're a block manager, we're all navigating this together and nobody has all the answers. Trafford Housing set up a fantastic building safety managers forum. We meet monthly. We decide on the agenda based on what its members want to hear about. We have a group on LinkedIn, and we are a support network for each other. I think the details on how to join are posted in the related content. So please, join us if you'd like to. We are really a good supportive group. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Yeah, really great insight there into how you're approaching things. And yeah, I think somebody's asked a question. Hopefully, we've kind of got on with answering that. I think in terms of some of the links there, but about the BIM group. Right. Thank you very much. Lots of questions coming in, and lots to get through and pick up on moving forwards. We've got about 20 minutes left to take those questions. So just a reminder, the Q&A box is there. Please do use it, and hopefully we can give you some useful takeaways that answer your specific questions for your organisation. Right, I will start off. I mean, perhaps we'll talk about that engagement issue that Kelly was just talking about. I mean, I think mentioning we make sure that we are visible. And when I spoke to Peter Baker, who's heading up the new building safety regulator last month, I mean, he was talking about a number of different aspects, but certainly from the regulator's point of view, he was saying one of the three things that's absolutely crucial for him is that making sure that is engaging residents and for stakeholders to view it as like workplace safety, where staff know what the problems are and the best way to fix them, and if you don't engage your residents, then you won't really get a full idea about the risks and the issues associated with a building. So yeah, just interested in that kind of issue about where you get your insight from. So we talked about the data, but perhaps the one area that would be interesting to expand on in terms of where that data comes from, perhaps not just the stock itself, but from the people who live in the building. So let's start there, if that's all right. And Kelly, I'll go straight back to you if that's all right, because you were talking about being visible. So yeah, talk us through your thinking on that, if that's okay.
Okay, so we found that in terms of keeping the data, we were in quite a good position. We filled all the gaps, but you're right, it's about making sure that our residents can see that as well. I think we're moving to a more digital way of life, and we presume that that's what our customers want. So we've got a digital tenancy portal, and we put everybody's compliance documents on their digital tenancy portal. But then only 26% of our customers have actually signed up to that. So I really do feel about that having a named building safety officer. I know you can have an organisational building safety officer, but having that named person where somebody feels that they could go to and that's communicated to them is really, really helpful. We really did find that our customers told us that they wanted to see us and they wanted to speak to us, and they didn't want to send an email to a generic email box.
Really interesting. And Liz, I will probably bring you in next and on this issue, just see how you're approaching that, and yeah, that kind of named v kind of organisational approach. And I'm also there's a number of questions for you, quite specific ones, which I'm going to the cloud-based question. So I'll just throw that at you. It's would be helpful if Liz can show a sample of the cloud-based systems they use, which cloud-based systems you use for tracking of fire safety actions. Did you buy an off-the-shelf system? What cloud-based platform do you use to monitor FRI actions? So a number of people asking very similar questions for you, Liz. So if you can enlighten us on that as well, and that issue about resident involvement as well, and how that feeds into the data you've got.
Yeah, no worries at all. So if I answer the question about the cloud-based system, it's called Risk Hub, and it's a system that was created by Savills. It's a really good system, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to open it up to kind of use all the compliance streams on that. Happy if anybody wants to get in contact with me, I'm more than happy kind of to talk through it and show you. So kind of put that out there. So in terms of customer involvement, I mean, obviously the size of Hyde, we've got around 50,000 properties from Peterborough down to kind of Brighton over in Kent and in London. We have our property managers who are visual and are going out on site, and they undertake some of those kind of inspections in our kind of larger estates. We've set up the Safer Homes panel, the building safety panel, and that allows the customers to kind of represent their neighbours and their community on the issues of compliance, of safer homes, but it gives us a chance to kind of discuss with them what we're trying to work on. So we want our customers to help shape how we deliver building safety. In terms of kind of our kind of ongoing approach for the digital solution, we're going through quite a large digital program, and it's kind of split into two. So one that we're looking at a solution that will help kind of maintain and do our repairs and compliance and keep that. And then the other one is about what do our customers want? How can we share information with our customers? And these programs are so aligned. And kind of holding the data, we're kind of implementing something called data lake. So all the data will be harvested from there, and then we'll be able to use APIs and other digital solutions to allow customers just to get exactly what they want. But we've also started, on our website, we provide updates on the major kind of fire remediation programs. We've got the fire risk assessments on there for the blocks that are over 18 metres. And I think what Kelly said is we have to listen, we have to be visible. You know, I meet with customers kind of on various blocks, kind of monthly, and kind of via Teams and Zoom, and it's a really uncertain time, not just with building safety, but particularly with the pandemic that we've been through. And sometimes it's just taken that time to listen and then kind of show action and take things forward.
Thanks very much, Liz. And I'm just going to come back to you just with a question while we're on this subject that's coming in. It's I think you've kind of certainly partially answered what you're sharing, but I mean, obviously you talked about a vast range of data that you're kind of collecting and is feeding into your system there. The question that's come through is, do you share your data with residents to offer some assurance? So I guess the extent to which you're sharing some of that data, and I think you partially answered that, but let's just get a...
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we share what we can. I mean, if there's any kind of sensitive information, we're very careful in that. But things like the kind of the fire risk assessments, the levels of compliance, yes, we share that. We share it kind of via our website, or if people want to contact us individually, we can share it like that. But as we move forward with our digital journey, our customers will be able to access that themselves.
Thanks very much. I'm going to move on to an issue that came up, I guess was touched on several times and came up in Lee's presentation. And I'm going to put this question to Angela first. But I mean, Lee, you were talking about how kind of still the basics getting wrong, the kind of the day-to-day stopping people getting prepared for tomorrow. And I guess my kind of question to start things off anyway for Angela is, I mean, obviously we've seen this week with the kind of Green Square Accords, the missing FRAs and the electrical inspections. I won't ask you to comment directly on that, but I guess why are landlords still failing at stuff like this? Kind of, it seems like the basics. Perhaps, I mean, I know you talked about a variety of reasons for failure, but yeah, is it that people think they're good at it and they're surprised, or is it that there's a kind of acknowledgement the systems are perhaps difficult to use? And yeah, did you agree with kind of Lee's point, I think earlier, that it then not getting that right is holding people back, if you like, from thinking about some of the what's happening next, what they need to be prepared for, and that might be building in problems a bit further down the line. So, Angela, interested in your opinions on that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Martin. Absolutely agree with that. I think so much around compliance and these discussions that we're having about compliance now and providers being compliant with the basics. They are just that. They are basics. They're what is needed to keep tenants safe in their homes. And I'm not saying that that's easy, but it is the basics. And getting that right is what will allow providers to start thinking about some of the more complicated and knotty issues that are coming out in the white paper and the other legislative changes as well. And I think we've been saying to the sector for a while now about, getting these basics right is what frees you up, and it's what allows you to start exploring, well, how can we digitalise this? How can we move on from this? How do we know that we're providing the very best to our tenants? So I think absolutely doing these bits right and getting them right really puts you on a really firm footing for moving forward with some of the more complicated things that are going to come at the sector in the next coming months and years.
Thanks very much. And I guess I'll just come to a question Simon's written in. Hi, Simon. And which gets to the how of that, and I'm interested in your thoughts there. And sorry, I'll just go to the question, which is, he says, as a former fire risk assessor who did a good chunk of work in housing, I would say 95% of housing has significant fire issues despite having had fire risk assessments annually. Management of risk and remediation is poor. The new requirements for occupied buildings in scope represent an enhanced management system. How are they going to cope when they can't currently manage existing management systems? So I think it's just, are you foreseeing that this is going to be a big issue for the sector? And also, do people need to wake up about that? I'm just wondering where they're kind of wandering around at the minute and thinking they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's already a big issue for the sector. I think it's only going to get more prevalent. As I said in my presentation, the sector is under ever greater scrutiny, and the demands of the sector are increasing considerably with all the changes that are coming through with the white paper and the building safety changes and things like that. So it is a challenge for any organisation. I think in terms of how they move forward and what's sort of blocking them, that is, it will be a variety of reasons that are holding organisations back. I think, as I said, most providers want to be compliant and want to do the right things. I see very little by way of providers who don't care about this, actually. In terms of the engagement that we have, most providers really do care about this. And most providers, when something goes wrong or when they find something that is wrong, you get a real sense of shock from those providers that everything that they thought was fine suddenly turns out to not be quite as they had thought. And I think it really does speak to providers, really trying to interrogate where they currently are and not being misled by where they are, in terms of, it's easy to think, as I said, that some things couldn't happen in your organisation, but they can happen, and they do. And I think checking the information that you've got and being as rigorous on that scrutiny as you can be will really help the sector to move forward.
Thanks very much, and I'm going to move on to a couple of additional areas. But anybody who wants to come back in on that, please do. Another question that's come in, I'll pick up on. We have fire risk assessments carried out annually, and all remedial actions get completed with within the recommended target datas given by the fire risk assessor. We report completions of these actions to the board. Our board are now asking for additional assurance that these actions have been completed, not just the staff member, for example, checking that these are done. How are other organisations providing this additional assurance? Is that a picture that other people recognise, and what are your thoughts on that comment? Where am I going to go with that first? Liz, do you want to give that one a whirl?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, that's a great point, and I think having that transparency, and particularly the system that we use, so we ensure that we are asking for the evidence. So whether that's kind of completion certificates, surveyors going out and inspecting it, photographs, and that's then all loaded and saved within the fire actions. So we've always got that evidence base of ensuring the actions, and we can follow that up. So even if we're doing like kind of a large program of works as well, everything is checked off and signed off, and kind of evidence is kept for it, because when we're going to be audited, when we've recently been audited, is our auditors want to see that. They want to see that physical evidence, and they want to be talked through. And quite rightly, if our customers ask for the fire risk assessment and can see that there was actions, we should be providing, and we do provide that evidence. So physical evidence for me, and stored on a location beside that action.
Thanks very much, Liz. That's really helpful. And Kelly, I might move to you on that, and then I'm going to move on to another question. Sorry, there's lots of questions coming in, so I'm trying to get through as many as possible. But Kelly, over to you.
Yeah, really, really similar to Liz, actually. We actually carried out our annual fire risk assessments last financial year and the year before that, and we had about 400 actions. And I think ever since the introduction of the FSO and everything and all the changes there, I think fire risk assessors have become a lot more risk averse, and our actions more than tripled, but really on the same building. So it's a minefield, but very much like Liz, we ensure that we have either documentation, photos, and they are all linked to that one action, and it is a golden thread. So you've got to close that loop.
And talking about that thread, actually, a question. So accountability, competence, and traceability, the three pillars of compliance. How are teams addressing competence internally and from external contractors. Kelly, I think you were kind of alluding to that there, yeah, I'll just throw that one back at you if that's right. So kind of internal compliance, building that, but also external from contractors. So questions coming from the audience.
I really think that's probably going to be one of our biggest hurdles. It's, you know, do we know who is working on our buildings on a daily basis? When we send something out to a contractor, how are we assured that it's that person on site? I'll be honest with you, I don't have all the answers. It is all about ensuring that your tenders are correct and you're keeping the competency details. We're introducing some sort of sign-in on each block, which then, you know, people are ticking boxes. And again, unfortunately, it sounds like a tick box exercise, but to say that they've read all the relevant information about that building. I'll be honest, I don't think there's going to be a golden arrow that's going to fix this really quickly. But I think it just means you've just got to take it back to basics.
Thanks very much, Kelly. And I'm going to move on to a couple of questions that were coming, well, actually referring to the survey. Obviously, a number of people asking about the survey and the results. And I think you can find it on the related content section of the website. I've been told to mention that rather than just pushing everybody in the direction of inside housing, which is always my urge. But there are a number of places you can find that. But Lee, that survey, you know, a number of findings that you referred to, but you know, one of them that stuck out for me as well is 30% of respondents said they don't know yet when asked how they're thinking about fulfilling their obligations when it comes to appointing a building safety manager. Is that struggle going to be one of the stories of the next 18 months for you? Yeah, what was that kind of telling you about where people are right now? So yeah, Lee.
Yeah, I think undoubtedly that's going to be a challenge and a problem. I think just going back a couple of questions, Martin, if I can, which will tie back to this.
Absolutely.
You asked in terms of, yeah, we talked about governance and why does this go wrong in organisations and why aren't organisations getting this right? It absolutely starts and finishes with the governors, the board, and the leaders, and it's about engaging them as champions and as advocates of what needs to happen and what needs to take place, because we come across in our body of work some fantastic CEOs, some fantastic executives who are all over this stuff, and we're at the other end of the scale where we come across some CEOs and some executives who are nowhere near this stuff. And actually, when we present the difficult news that you've got some real significant issues here, culturally how they respond is really, really important. And I was delighted to read Ruth's article this morning from Green Accord in terms of, if anybody wants to read an article about great leadership and a great response to a crisis, Ruth's article this morning was really, really refreshing, because she's coming at it from the right sort of cultural standpoint in terms of, we've got this wrong, we need to acknowledge it, we need to move forward, we need to address it, rather than denying there's an issue or a problem. And we do have execs and chief execs who deny there's a problem or don't want to know there's a problem. So this is where it goes wrong, or where it goes right, is governance and leadership. There was an issue about data and systems, and just a bit of a health warning about the systems that have been named. They are all capable and competent of helping organisations do what they need to do around data, but unless the organisation knows what they want to do with their data and how they want to use their data, these systems don't always necessarily give you the answer. So unless you forensically clean your data and understand your data and specify how you want to use it, inadvertently you can buy one of these systems and assume it's going to fix your data problems, and they don't always fix your data problems. And then the third thing about competence, and there was a question there around why do boards want external scrutiny on this? Well, that's about getting a third line of assurance. So yes, your fire risk assessments have been done, your actions have been carried out, and officers internally have told you everything's as it should be, and that's great. But boards need that external validation that what they're being told internally is actually reflective of what's happening on the ground and what's being presented to them. So it's actually a really good thing that third line of assurance is there. So I just wanted to cover those points really, Martin, just to clarify some of the previous issues.
No, fabulous. That's a great run through and some really valuable takeaways there. I think we are coming to the end, so we've got a couple of minutes left. I'm going to try and race through a couple of questions here. There's a question about how are your various organisations ensuring you keep on top of the changing legislation around the fire and building safety regulations. And I guess, Angela, I'll come to you on that, because the other question I've got is, I guess, with the new regulator being set up, new structures being put in place, is there a danger that people are getting confused by the kind of raft of the changes, and that some things might fall between the gaps, or that people just kind of wait there's kind of stasis? Angela, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you. And I think that sort of complexity of the regulatory landscape is something that we talk about a lot internally, and we talk a lot to the sector about as well. And I think it's really important for us, but certainly important for the sector, to make sure that we have a really clear map of who's responsible for what and how we work together. So at the regulator, we're doing an awful lot of work with the building safety regulator to make sure that things don't fall between those gaps. And that this is intended to make the system work better, rather than to complicate it any further. So I think it is an important issue for the sector. I think, making sure that we will be as clear as we can be in our messaging. I'm sure other bodies in this landscape will do the same. But I think, really encouraging providers to engage with that at an early stage and understand what that landscape is, I think will probably set them in good stead for moving forward.
Thanks very much, Angela. One question from Simon. I will throw it to Liz very quickly. Do many housing providers use external audit to validate their management? Liz, just a very quick answer to that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, we have internal auditors, but they're an external provider, and they provide us with kind of that level of assurance.
Thank you very much, Liz. Very direct answer. Much appreciated, because we've now hit 1 o'clock. So I will bring things to a close. We've raced through, hopefully, a lot of questions, got some really detailed answers, which hopefully will be of use to you back at the office and back in your day-to-day roles. Lee very kindly has asked where that article that another Lee Woods referred to earlier, that's Ruth Cook, who's the Chief Executive of Green Square Accord. And yes, now I can safely point you in the direction of Inside Housing, where that appeared yesterday. So there's a detailed talk through from her there. All that remains for me to do today is to thank you all for tuning in for a really stimulating and absolutely fascinating series of presentations and discussion. Thank you to our fabulous panel for an absolutely great debate there, and to our sponsors, Pennington Choices, for making it possible as well. So thank you all very much for tuning in, and see you all very soon. Thank you.